Hello everyone, and welcome back to our Quest and Dialog system in Godot 4 and GDScript. In this video, we will create the UI components for our Dialog, Quest, and Quest tracker. On our Dialog UI, we will display the dialog text, responses, and the name of the NPC that we are talking to. On our Quest UI, we will show the list of accepted quests as well as their details when we click on them. And then on our Quest Tracker UI, we will show the details of the currently selected or activated quest. Let's open up our project, but before we get started on creating the UI, I first want to show you our project settings. If you are using the base project, you will see that the stretch mode and aspect settings of our window has been changed. I've set it to viewport and expand so that our UI won't be too small or too big if the screen size is different than the one we're working on. In other words, our UI will expand and stretch to fit whatever screen it is being displayed on, making it quite dynamic. So if you're working in your own project, make sure that you change these settings so that your project can also be more responsive to the different devices that might run your game. Or just follow along.
Obviously, don't go and do that, please.
You do whatever you like.
Okay, so underneath our scenes folder, let's create a new folder called Dialog. This is where we will store all of our dialogue related scenes for easier management and separation. We'll do the same for our scripts. So underneath our scripts folder, let's create a new folder called Dialog. This is where we will store all of our dialogue related scripts. While we're at it, let's do the same for our quest system, which we'll create later on. So, underneath our scenes folder, let's create a new folder called Quest. This is where, the same as with our dialog system, we will store all of our quest-related scenes for easier management. And then we'll also do the same in our scripts folder. Let's create a new folder called Quest, and this is where we will store all of our quest-related scripts. Okay, so let's create a new scene called Dialog UI, and it should have a control node as the root node. We'll save the scene underneath our scene/dialog folder. Make sure to rename your root node as Dialog UI, and let's add a canvas layer node to the scene. To this canvas layer node, let's add a panel node. In my other tutorials, I usually resort to using a coloric nodes for backgrounds and containers, but today I've decided that a panel node is exactly what we need because it has a lot more customizability options. Now this panel node will hold our entire dialog, so we want it to usually be at the bottom of the screen. To do this, we will change its anchor preset to be bottom wide. This means it will stick to the bottom of our screen. We can see it's at the bottom of our screen now, but it's a bit small. So let's change its size to something like 1132 pixels by 270 pixels. Okay, perfect. We have the size of our panel and it's stuck to the bottom of our screen, but it is currently below our viewport. So let's move it up a bit. You'll see I did some math there in the inspector panel, and then I just moved it to 10 so it's in the center. So my X position is 10 pixels and my Y position is 354 pixels. Okay, now that we have our positioning and our size correct, let's give our panel a bit of a background and a border. To do this, we will need to give our panel a new style box flat style. We will set our background to be a bright blue color. Make sure to add this color to your swatches panel for easy access in the future. Then we will give it a border of 2 pixels thick on all sides. This color of this border will be a light blue color. With our dialog background created, we can now add a VBox container node to this panel so that we can stack our name, dialog, and responses on top of one another. We'll rename this node to Dialog Box. We want this container to span across the entire panel, so let's change its anchor preset to be full rect. Okay, perfect. But I don't really want the dialog box to be the entire panel because I don't want the text and buttons and responses to go over the border that we just created. So we'll need to change its size to be about 20 pixels less on both the X and Y axes. Now we just need to center it, so change its position to be 10 pixels on both the X and Y axes. We also want to separate our items in the future, so let's change its separation value to something like 15. Okay, now we can start adding our content to our dialog box. Let's add 2 label nodes and an HBox container node to our dialog box node. The 2 labels will contain our NPC name and our dialog text, and the HBox container node will display the possible responses that we as the player can choose from. Let's rename the nodes as Dialog Speaker, Dialog Text, and Dialog Options. Let's change our dialog speaker node's font size to be 20 pixels and the font color to be the same blue color that we just added for our border. Then, change the dialog text node's font size to be 23 pixels and its horizontal and vertical alignment to be centered. We also wanted to take up the most space in the dialog box, so let's enable it to fill and expand on the vertical axes. Okay, and then finally, let's change our dialog options node's alignment to be centered. We'll also give it a separation value of 20 so that our responses aren't stacked tightly together. We won't add anything to our dialog options node because we'll do that via the code later on. But for now, let's add one last node to our panel node, and that is a button which will allow us to close the dialog. Rename this node to Close Button. Change its size to be 36 pixels by 36 pixels and change its anchor preset to be top right. We'll also move it a bit downward so that it is underneath the blue border and not fully in the corner. And then finally, let's change its font size to be 20 pixels. And there we have our Dialog UI created. To finish off this Dialog UI section, let's attach a new script to our scene. We'll save the script underneath our script/dialog folder. In this script, let's create node references to all of our dialog-related nodes. Okay, so we created a node reference to our panel node because this is the node that will open and close our dialog box. We created node references to our speaker, text, and options nodes because these are the nodes that will populate our dialog box with the data from the dialog data. And that wraps up our dialog UI. Now we can move on to our Quest UI, which in essence is our Quest log. Just like with our dialog UI, let's create a new scene with the control node as its root node. We'll save the scene underneath our scene/quest folder. Make sure to rename the root node to QuestUI, and then just as before, let's add a canvas layer node and a panel node to the scene, but this time make sure that the panel node is set to full screen by setting its anchor preset to be full rect. Now, at this point, you might be wondering why I'm using a canvas layer node in each scene. I did it in the Dialog UI, and now I'm doing it once again in the Quest UI. Well, the reason for this is because I wanted to access the layers property from this node that will set our Quest UI to always be in front of our other UI components. So, if we are in a dialog and we accidentally press the button to open the quest log, then our quest log will always be shown above everything else. You might also be wondering why I'm not using the z-index property of these nodes instead. And personally, it's because I don't like setting the z-index property on control or UI nodes, because I like to reserve that for my other components, such as my player and my tile map layer. For UI nodes, I just usually add them all to a canvas layer and then just set their priority via the layers property. It's a personal preference, really, because I just feel like it's more organized, but you can do whatever you want.
To school? Ah! Sorry, Mama.
With all my jabbering aside, let's change our canvas layer node's layer property to be equal to 2. Okay, so this will ensure that our Quest UI or our Quest log will always be shown above everything else. Now, to the panel node, let's add a HBox container node, and we'll rename this node to backgrounds. This container will split our screen into 2 parts so that we can have a different colored background for our quest list on the one side and another background color for our quest details on the other side. Since we want the backgrounds to take up the entire screen, we'll have to set our HBox container's anchor preset to be full rect. To make these backgrounds, let's add 2 panel nodes. Name the first one background 1 and the second one background 2. We want both of them to take up half of the entire screen. So, change both of their horizontal and vertical sizing options to be expanded so that they can stretch across the entire remaining space. And now we have our backgrounds. We'll set the color of our first background to be a bright blue color. We'll also give it a 10 pixel thick border on the right hand side to help us separate our containers. Change this border color to be a dark blue color. And then we'll set the color of the second background to be an even darker blue. You'll see that there is an odd color right in the middle. So to our panel node, our main panel, let's add a new style box flat and change its color to be the color of the second background. And there we have our backgrounds. Now we can add the containers for our content. So add a new VBox container to the panel node and rename it to contents. Change its anchor preset to be full rect and its separation value to 50. To the contents node, add a HBox container node called headings. This will contain all of the headings for each of our container sides. Add two labels to this node, one named List and the other named Details. Change both of their font sizes to be 30 pixels and their container sizing to be expanded. Then, change the text of the list node to be available quests and the text of the details node to be quest details. We want both of these to be uppercase and centered, so let's enable its uppercase value and change both of their horizontal and vertical alignment to be centered. Now we have our headings and we can add our actual content. So to your contents node, add another HBox container, but rename this HBox container to details. This container, just like our backgrounds, will split our screen into two sides so that we can show our quest list on the one side and our quest details on the other side. Let's change its sizing options to be expanded and its separation value to be 10. Then, to this details node, add two VBox containers. Rename the first VBox container to Quest List and the second VBox container to Quest Details. change both of their sizing options to be expanded and their separation value to be 10. In case you don't know, this separation value is the spacing between contents in this container so that everything isn't stacked tightly together. We will populate our quest list node dynamically with all of the accepted quests that our player has, and then the player should be able to click on the quest in that list. So for now, we'll leave our quest list node empty. For our quest details node, we can add the nodes which will show the title, description, objectives, and rewards of our currently selected quests from the list. So, to your quest details node, add 2 label nodes and 2 VBox container nodes. Rename the labels to quest title and quest description, and the VBox containers to quest objectives and quest rewards. Change your quest title node's font size to be 20 pixels and center it horizontally and vertically. Then, change your quest description node's font size to be 20 pixels. Just like with our quest list, we will dynamically populate our quest objectives and rewards nodes with the data of the quest. So for now, we will also leave those nodes empty. Then finally, let's copy over our close button from our Dialog UI and add it to our Quest UI, since we will need this to close our quest log. Okay, and that is our Quest UI created. Now, just as we did for our Dialog UI, let's attach a script to our scene. We'll save the script underneath our scripts/quest folder. In the script, we will create a node reference to all of our quest-related nodes, aka the nodes we will populate with data. And there we have our Quest UI created. Now we need to create the final UI for this very long video. This final UI will be our quest tracker. This quest tracker will show the quest objectives on the player's HUD so that we can see what we need to do for our currently selected quest and what we've already done. Because we will be adding rewards in our quest system, we will also have to add a panel that will keep track of our coin count, which is the reward that our player will receive when completing quests. So, in our player scene, let's add a new canvas layer node and we'll rename it to HUD. To this HUD, add a new coloric node which will keep track of our coin count. Rename it to Coins. Change its color to be a light gray color and its size to be 200 pixels by 100 pixels. We'll also anchor it to the top right of our screen. Because we don't want it to be fully in the corner, we will just drag it down a bit, about 16 pixels from the top and right-hand side. Then, to display our coins and our amount, we will need to add a texture rect node and a label node. Rename these nodes to icon and amount. Change the icon to be your coins icon, which in the base project is icon20.png. We want it to take up half of the entire coins color rect, so let's change its anchor preset to be left wide. Okay, it looks a little funky now because it's stretching in all the wrong places. So let's change its expand node to fit the width. And there we have it, our beautiful coin icon. Now, let's select the amount node and change its text to 0, its font size to 50 pixels, and its anchor preset to be center right. And that is our coin panel created. Very simple and very basic. Let's create the actual UI that we wanted to build, which is our Quest tracker. We will use another coloric node for this, so to your HUD node, add a new coloric node and rename this node to Quest tracker. Change its color to be the same color as the coins panel. Then, let's change its size to be about 300 pixels by 200 pixels, and then we'll also move it 16 pixels away from the sides. Then, add a VBox container to this node and rename it to Details. We'll want it to take up the entire space, so change its anchor preset to be full rect and its separation value to 10. Then, add a label node and a VBox container node to your Details node. Rename the label to Title and the VBox container to Objectives. Select the title node and change its font color to be a light blue color and its font size to be 25 pixels. We also want to align it to the center and change its text casing to be uppercase. Select your Objectives node and change its sizing to be expanded. We'll dynamically populate our tracker with data, so we'll also leave it as is for now. The last thing that we need to do is to get our node references for our tracker and our coin UI in our player script, and we'll also hide our quest tracker on load so that it isn't visible if we have no quest selected. You'll see that I got a node reference to our coins amount, our quest tracker, our quest title, and our quest objectives. And that is it for our UI section. I always like to mass create the UI in the beginning of a series so that we can get it out of the way and then focus purely on the logic and mechanics that we actually want to implement. If you've watched my videos in the past, you will know that I do not particularly enjoy UI development, and that's why my UI always looks extremely basic and just not that appealing. I used to be a website developer, and even back then, I never really enjoyed working on the UI side of things. But that being said, I can't deny that there is an odd satisfaction to seeing your site or your game or anything that you're working on look pretty and well put together. A couple of you have reached out to me in the comments to tell me that you enjoy making the UI side of things. So to you who do, I truly admire you, and I hope that I do get there one day where I actually also enjoy making the UI. But that's it for me for now. In the next part, we will finally start creating our dialog system, and we will start by setting up our dialog resource and creating our very big JSON structure. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.